change what minimum wage means. Rather than raising the minimum wage to $15, $20, $25, why do we not change the entire definition of what minimum wage is? Why can't it legally be defined as the minimum amount of money to afford a decent one-bedroom apartment, internet, food, clothes, insurance, gas, phone, etc.? I feel like by the time the dollar amount gets changed, we will need it to be higher than what we're asking for. Change it to reflect and adapt to the cost of living at any point now or in the future. What you describe is precisely what the minimum wage was at the time it was passed. The intention and effect initially was that this wage was sufficient for a family to thrive. Minimum wage was essentially what gave us the idea of the white picket fence. 2.5 children, a family car, all because it could pay for that. Unfortunately, decades of concerted effort by politicians and greedy-ass billionaires has turned the minimum wage into a starvation, slave wage. And they string people along with things like $15 per hour. By the time places had started passing it, inflation had turned that idea into needing $22 per hour to be a living wage. Frankly, that we let the intention of the minimum wage fall to the poor standard it is now is one of the great failures of American society. We tried to legally define it in the early 1970s, and both parties basically shouted it down as a horrible idea that would take away something they could fight over. The greatest tool of exploitation is obfuscation. If we clearly define what the expectation is, then it becomes too easy for too many people to realize it's not happening. As it stands now, people can just say, those jobs are just for high school kids, get a better job. Everyone knows you can't live on minimum wage, but it's been distorted into this idea that it's your fault you don't have a better job. If we set a clear definition like you are saying, then there is no more room to adjust, blame, or mince words. It is intentional. Those at the top want to have a way to exploit you because they think they are entitled to the wealth and power to decide the future of humanity and to live in luxury and extravagance. They know there is enough food to feed the starving. They want people desperate and pointing fingers at each other. They are evil and have no empathy. You only matter so far as you can be exploited. The definition of the minimum wage per FDR is a living wage. It doesn't need to be redefined. It needs to be adhered to. When the concept of a minimum wage was conceived, that is exactly what it meant. The minimum needed to provide a comfortable life, not the minimum you could be paid. In 1938, it was the minimum required to support a family of 45 on one income. So it was actually better than what you're proposing when it was implemented. Another name for that is COLA adjustment, which stands for Cost of Living Adjustment (GRIN). Some countries automatically adjust their legal minimum wage after inflation. But in the USA, employers hate COLA, and their lobbyists have successfully prevented automatic COLA adjustments to be implemented for minimum wage. Most federal programs have some kind of built-in mechanism to update dollar amounts for inflation. For Social Security, benefits have been indexed to changes in the Consumer Price Index (CPI) since 1974, while federal benefit programs like Social Security are indexed for inflation. The federal minimum wage isn't. The federal minimum wage has been increased over the years whenever Congress and the President got around to it. As a result, there have been only 7 minimum wage increases over the past 30 years. Back in 1974, when COLAs for Social Security were first indexed for inflation, the federal minimum wage was $2 an hour. If the minimum wage had also been indexed to the CPI, The inflation-adjusted minimum wage today would be $9.16 an hour. If the federal minimum wage had been updated since 1974 using the Social Security yardstick, it would now stand at $10.74 an hour. https inequality.org/research/koliskpisawas14 minimum wage/ By the way, that article was written in 2012. It would be much higher now. In sum, like universal healthcare and free school lunch, it's a good idea, very simple and effective, not new or difficult, prevented only by the greed and cruelty of the powerful. What if a week's pay was enough for rent or a house payment? It seems to me to be equally plain that no business which depends for existence on paying less than living wages to its workers has any right to continue in this country. By business, I mean the whole of commerce as well as the whole of industry. By workers I mean all workers, the white-collar class as well as the men in overalls. And by living wages I mean more than a bare subsistence level, I mean the wages of decent living. Franklin D. Roosevelt, after creating minimum wage laws, aka the National Industrial Recovery Act. The current minimum wage is a vague concept, which the owner class has spent billions of dollars on convincing people that it's a dirty thing. It has been transformed from the minimum wage that a person can earn to afford a basic standard of living within the economic system that they contribute to, and has become a frustrating clause that the owner class must navigate in order to partake in their own profit orgy. Now minimum wage is, if I could pay you less or nothing, I would, but the law prevents me from doing so. Why the hell haven't I heard this before? It's a great idea. I personally think it's a rather easy calculation. You base it on the FMR, fair market rent, value of the area, and you should base it on 40 hours. Full-time. Generally the calculation is 33% of gross income should be your max for housing. But our calculation should be more like 28% of gross income should be what covers the FMR for a 1BR apartment, or efficiency depending upon the market, because someone working full-time should be able to afford living in a home by themselves. Roommates is if you want to save more IMHO. You should be able to afford a single residence for yourself on a full-time minimum wage job. Thus if the FMR for a 1BR, where I live, is $900, $900 per 0.28 equals $3,200 per 160 hours. Full-time 40 hours, week, equals $20. This is personally how I would do the metrics. Because minimum wage shouldn't be something you can probably take a vacation on. But it also should be enough to cover all major expenses with a little left over. I think this equation goes a long way of getting us there. Maybe we should subsidize workers. If workers don't get paid enough by their employers, then the rest of their pay could be subsidized with cash instead of food stamps. Close all the tax loopholes for high earners and corporations and place a higher tax on the rich. Universal health care as well. Supply and demand. There is a plethora of demand for low-skill workers, so business owners take advantage of them not only financially but emotionally as well. What pisses me off in general is even in skilled positions, just as an example, they drastically underpay, and that's just one field, it's across the board in multiple professions. Wages have been stagnant, yet they expect more work being done with no extra compensation. That's the theft. This and the offshoring, where they pay workers significantly less than minimum wage in the US and charge astronomical amounts for products when they come into the country. The sad part is this only scratches the surface. A little like the living wage? Not that living wage is enough. Edit. Sorry, thought I was on a NZ thread. Living wage is an initiative done outside of government that employers can sign up to. No obligation for them to stick with it though. Before you read this, just know I am for a living wage. The part few are talking about is what happens to all the other jobs, careers not at min wage, but slightly above it. Let's say you have a degree and you're earning $25 per hour. If a living wage goes to $22 per hour, then you must raise all other wages to reflect the qualifications versus a min wage job. Two things will happen. All wages increase or people will no longer seek those jobs and accept min wage jobs. Unfortunately, most of the jobs I'm taking about are some of the most needed. LPN, nurse aides, caseworkers, etc. Great catch. This whole movement had a dollar amount tied to it. After the movement gained traction, look what the Seunts did. These politicians aren't leaders. They are the puppets who distract you from your subjugation by telling you what you want to hear. Until you vote. The idea of freedom? Freedom is for the rich. The rest of us are slaves. I think it would be better to get rid of minimum wage and institute a maximum wage. So there's a limit to how much more money a person can make than the lowest person. So the highest paid person at a company can only make 5x or 10x the amount the lowest paid person gets. What country are you in where the minimum wage isn't already over $15 an hour? It's just over $22 an hour where I live. What you refer to is called a living wage. I feel like instead of a minimum wage, we need a maximum wage, and business owners can only earn above it if none of their employees are on any type of government assistance. I know there are plenty of people who are poor but don't qualify for assistance, but I feel like it's at least a starting point.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.